Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show.
I feel like most comic readers have, at one point in their lives, picked up their pencil and tried to draw Batman or tried to draw Spider-Man. You know, at one point, they have lived that struggle of like, how do I make this comic book? And they've also, everybody's like written something through their, you know, high school career, whatever, and they understand what writing is. But I don't think that a lot of people, the average comic reader, has tried to sit down and color a page. So I think there's a misconception of like, oh, well, you just colored Superman blue and you moved on. Like how hard is that? Anybody could do that. I think there's that misconception, and that the more people to even just get to like take a shot, like try a page out, not even trying to be like, I'm going to break into the industry, but just like sit down with a page in Photoshop and try it. It will give you a huge look into like what is actually happening in the nuts and bolts of this page and what the colorist is doing and how difficult it actually is. And I think that if more comic readers did that, there would be more fan appreciation for the colorist.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Shortbox Podcast.
The Shortbox Podcast is recorded live from Jacksonville, Florida.
Yo, Shortbox Nation. Welcome back. This is episode 341, and hello to our new friends joining us for the first time. Welcome to your new favorite comic podcast. I'm your host, Botter Milligan, and today I'm bringing you an excellent conversation with comic colorist Nick Filardi. Nick has colored for just about every major comic book publisher, including DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse. He's currently coloring the Justice League Infinity series, a new comic run that launched this year, and it immediately picks up after the Justice League Unlimited cartoon season 3 finale. Nick has also been part of award-winning teams in the comic industry alongside powerhouse writers and artists like Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Avon Oeming, Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba, Seth Peck, and a whole lot more. You'll hear about his career in full and have all of your burning questions about being a colorist in comics answered in this episode. But before we do just that, I want to thank our sponsors, Gotham City Limit and Black Hive Tattoo, for bringing you this episode commercial free. Gotham City Limit is Jacksonville's premier shop for comics, toys, collectibles, and more, and Black Hive is Jacksonville's foremost appointment-only custom tattoo studio. Both of them are the best at what they do, so if you live in the area or find yourself passing through Jacksonville, stop by the shop and tell them the Shortbox sent you. And speaking of hometown, if you live in Jacksonville or the surrounding area, guess what? You're invited to our December live show. That's right. Come Friday, December 10th, we're getting back on stage to record an episode of this podcast in front of a live audience at the Brian Gooding Planetarium at the Museum of Science and History. You can register for some free tickets by visiting the Eventbrite link in this episode's show notes. So come on out for a damn good time. It'll be a Spider-Man themed episode to coincide with the highly anticipated Spider-Man No Way Home movie. Put it on your calendars now so you don't miss out. Let's go and give it up one more time for our sponsors and bring on our esteemed guest. Shortbox Nation, it's my privilege to welcome a master wielder of pigment. Let's put our hands together and welcome Nick Filardi to the show. Hey, Nick, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. That was a hell of an intro.
I try to do my best Kevin Smith impersonation when it comes to that. I was really into Fat Man on Batman when I first got into podcasting, and he had some of the best intros. Like he always made the guests, especially when he was doing like heavy comic book interviews, he always made them feel like, holy shit, am I on a Hollywood,
I'm feeling it, man. I like it.
How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. I will say right up top, I am probably going to screw up Justice League Infinity's name at some point. For some reason, it like wormed in my brain that it's like Justice League Infinite, and that's it.
It might have to do with the fact that like I feel like a lot of like especially like the big two, they use the word infinite in a lot of like comic books. I don't know what it was, but like that little brain worm got in there, and I just absolutely I'm working on like the last issue now, and I cannot for the life of me get rid of that brain worm. Look, you're talking to the right guy when it comes to mispronouncing things. I think I am the king of it at this show. It's
I listened to your Eternals episode. You did pretty well,
dude. Thank you. I think we first met at, it was Collective Con, maybe I think 3-4 years ago now. But
it's longer than that, man. It's been 2 years of pandemic at least right now.
Right. So we'll say about 5 years. I think 5 years is a safe bet. But I'll never forget walking by your table, introducing myself. I think you were like, oh, no, you do the short box. Yeah, I listen. And I remember you telling me, I got something to say about your man Cesar. And I thought it was the funniest shit ever.
Just let him enjoy things. He needs to just enjoy things. That's what I got to say. That's my message to him. Just like a thing. Just like it.
Well, look, I mean, he does play, he is our resident old guy, crusty old guy on this show. # old guy in a Wu-Tang shirt. So, I mean, but I think, Cesar has gotten vastly better at just enjoying shit. So, Nick, you also live in the Sunshine State. I think Gainesville, if I'm not mistaken, right?
You are mistaken.
Oh.
I have just moved out of Florida. I'm up in the Asheville, North Carolina area now.
Is that why it feels more gloomier than ever? We lost our
might be one of the reasons. Sure. Florida just kind of ran its course. My partner Shannon went and started working from home, working remotely, and we were like, well, our lease came up and we were like, we could stay in Florida or we could try some other stuff. And she was like, let's go to Asheville. So
nice.
We're in the area now.
What's the comic culture out there like? Any good shops?
Oh man, I wish I could tell you right now, but like, because I've been so freaked out from COVID that like here's the thing. I've picked up 2 projects from other colorists who have caught COVID.
Oh, wow.
And then, which is tragic. Like it's awful. And so I would receive those projects and I'd be like, shit, I can't get COVID. Like I can't get sick. I got all these books I got to get out. And like, I don't want to, a lot of this stuff too. It's like, Justice League Infinity, like, I don't want to pass it over to somebody on the last issue. Like, I want to see it through. This is my team, this is my book. I put a lot of heart in this thing. So I'm like real careful about like going places, wearing masks. Like, I'm vaccinated, but I'm like, I don't want that breakthrough case, man. It freaks me out. I've kind of realized in the last like 4 months or so that like we're hitting a point where COVID might just be a thing we have to live with. And like, cons are starting up again. And I'm like, man, I didn't do any cons for, when they got canceled the first year of the pandemic. And I was like, I got invited to a few for 2022. And I'm like, man, I don't know. But I'm like, shit, I'm going to have to start doing shows again. Like my enjoyment level aside, or my fear of COVID aside, like I just have to, like I said, put that aside and be like, I got to do shows because I want to sign books and I want to hang out with people and I want to see what everybody's working on.
Sure.
And I might just have to like live with the virus. So I am going to hit shops in the area soon, TM, but like it just hasn't happened yet.
Hey, look, you got to do what was right for you and how, live within that comfort zone. I don't it's serious out there.
Yeah.
So you're now living in Asheville. Where did you grow up and what's your earliest memory of comic books? Can you like recall the moment that you became a fan?
So I was born in New London, Connecticut. There's a great shop there, Sarge's Comics. My mom insists that she gave me a bunch of comics when I was like first starting to read, because she was like, I want you reading as much as you can, and like comics are a good way to get a kid reading all the time.
Agreed.
And I was just like, I don't care about these. Like at the time, for whatever reason, I just like, she just couldn't get them to stick. So, but then I started watching, I was into art, and then I started watching Batman the Animated Series, and it like
perfect gateway.
Yeah, it like clicked in my brain. I was like, oh, this is something like bigger than what I thought it was. And so once that happened, I went into Sarge's, and I had a couple of friends who were like reading comics. And so I went into Sarge's, and they were doing a deal at the time where they had like a crazy amount of back issues. And in the center of their store, they just had long box after long box after long box. And they were like, we'll give you a long box. You can fill it up with anything that's a back issue out of this entire like store shelves for like $40. They were just, you got to keep in mind too, this is like, I think this is like 96, 97. So like the 90s boom had happened, and they had all these back issue books like hanging out. So I was like, oh, I'm like excited about this. I want to get into comics. I'm just going to start pulling stuff out of these bins, and like, picked up like Jim Lee's X-Men run, and like, and then I also started picking up the Batman where Bane breaks his back. What's it called? Knight's End, Knight's Quest.
I think it's Nightfall, right?
Nightfall. Yeah. So all those comics had like, it said like Nightfall 1 or Nightfall 6 or whatever at the top of the book. So I didn't know anything about comics, but I was like, these all go together. So I just started like filling a long box with them, and I was grabbing like, Robin issues that had the logo on it, and like, Nightwing issues that had the logo on it, whatever, just throwing it in, make sense of it later. And then I read all that stuff, and I was like, between like Batman the Animated Series happening, and then me reading that, and then the current series for Batman at the time was when Gotham got hit by the quake, and Batman was like, it was like No Man's Land.
Yeah.
That
shit ran for like years.
Yeah, and I was like eating it up, because it was like Batman the Animated Series felt to me at the time like kind of a classic Batman. Like you get one villain and you get kind of like a gateway into their world. And then I was reading this thing where Batman wasn't Batman. It was Azrael. And so I was getting this like alternate take on Batman. And then the current stuff was like an alternate take on Gotham, which is a character within Batman in and of itself. So I was reading like all these things all at once, consuming all this content, and I was just hooked. Like it was just so interesting the way that you could play with the same character in so many different ways, that I was like, you know what? Maybe there's more to comics than I realized. Maybe there's more here. So yeah, I really feel like that stuff made me hooked. And then I was also, reading, of course, the Jim Lee X-Men stuff was like, I was a teen, and it was like blowing my mind. And I also picked up Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man stuff, which gatewayed me into Eric Larson's Spider-Man stuff, which is like buck wild. He gets like the cosmic powers and everything. Dude. Yeah, it's so good.
That and was it David? I would say his last name right, but Michelin. Was he the writer for the Eric Larson stuff? Because I got really into the David Michelin and Mark Bagley. So right after Eric, like the tail end of Eric Larson, Mark Bagley comes on board, and I like, much to your story, like that was my first comic series where I was buying every issue, trying to fill in like holes in my collection and whatnot. So yeah, that Eric Larson run that predates it a little bit is fantastic. Doing some wild stuff, introducing some really cool characters like Cardiac.
yeah, so good, man. All that stuff. I don't know if you've read it lately, but it holds up. It's super fun.
Granted, it does get very confusing when they start tying it into like Clone Saga and doing that.
Sure. Yeah, I jumped out by the time they hit Clone Saga.
I just couldn't afford it. But I wanted to kind of go back to your comic journey because I understand that you also went to SCAD for school.
Yeah.
And all I really know about it, other than it being a very prestigious and expensive art school, is that it does have a, I think at one point, it had a very like high dropout rate. Like people were comparing it to like going to doctor school and how stressful it is. But there is a handful of SCAD alumni that are working in comics today. And there is a lot of like comic professionals that, graduated from SCAD. How much of the stuff did you learn from SCAD would you say you still use in your professional career? Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show.
That's kind of hard to quantify because, like, when you talk about like specifically what I do for as a colorist, it's like, well, they only had one coloring class. Like it was one coloring class, which was 1/3 of one semester in my entire 4 years there. But like, there's also like, I'm better at rendering because I took life drawing classes. Like I'm better at storytelling because I sat there and made pages every week, even though I was never, my art that I was making at the end of while I was at SCAD, by the time I was a senior, was not good enough to be like a Spider-Man artist or a Batman artist. Like I was still picking up like storytelling cues, and like I was still reading scripts and translating that to images. And those skills help with coloring. Like it's all, because you're at the end of the day, you're just trying to make like the most engaging page that you can, and also the clearest page you can for the reader. I know when you were talking about Eternals in that other episode that was up, you were talking about how there were parts where Kirby was like going off, and like you just need like a sign in the darkness to like point you in the right direction. And like a good colorist does that. A good colorist will help the reader be like, okay, what you really want to pay attention to is the candlestick on the table over here, because this is going to be the murder weapon 10 pages from now, and I learned that stuff from drawing books and trying to figure out how to do that in black and white, and then eventually how to do that in color. So it's kind of a weird thing to quantify. And oh man, the cost of SCAD is like, I when I got out, I had $80K of debt.
Holy
and
shit.
dude, you say that,
Oh,
but
that's on the
currently,
low end.
this was 2004 when I was out.
What was the degree you got?
I think it was just a bachelor's in sequential art, maybe. I don't know. I don't even have the bachelor's. Like we have
That's
in
another
our
20,000 to get the paper copy.
Yeah, right, exactly. We have a guest room here in Asheville, and my partner Shannon is a highly decorated woman. She has 2 degrees. She ran track and cross country at an SEC competitive level for the University of Florida.
Oh wow.
Like she's no joke.
The real deal.
Wall of accolades. And then I have my tiny high school diploma in the corner. no SCAD paperwork on the wall. But the cost of it has gone up to like, I think it's like 210,000 now for 4 years. It's really, really difficult. I have a lot of people ask me like, should I go to SCAD? And I just wanted to talk about this because I just was like,
yes,
I
please,
learned all these things that made me a successful colorist, but the cost of it is so high. And when I got out, I was like, coloring is my most marketable skill. I even got a jump on my classmates because I fell in with a very like tenacious, motivated crowd of people just by coincidence. And we were going to Comic-Cons, and I was showing a terrible portfolio around, but like getting the experience of showing that portfolio to other working professionals and stuff like that. And a lot of my classmates weren't doing that. Like a lot of them were just like doing the projects and then they're being done, like that's it. That's all they were thinking about. And, I don't fault them for that because SCAD never really pushed us at the time. I don't know how it is now, but they never really pushed us to go to shows. So when I got out, I knew that coloring was my most marketable skill. And I knew that I needed money right the heck now because that student loan payment's coming due.
Yeah, that deferment only lasts 3 weeks.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I'm like, oh God, I got to find 4 books to color in 3 weeks. It's like, that's not reality. Like, I think the first year that I was out, I made like $12,000 total over the whole year. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was like, it's a rough beat, and it's tough to justify that payment because, that's debt that you got to get saddled with for a long, long time. And especially at 18, when I was making the decision to go to SCAD, it was like, $80,000 and $10,000 felt the same to me. Like I had at 18, it's like, I can only picture money up to like maybe $1,000.
Yeah, whatever I can put in my wallet,
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, oh, $80,000, $10,000, that's all the same. It's just infinite money. Like who could ever think of like, and I think by the time that I got out, I realized, oh, this was a big step that I took, and it worked out for me. But man, it does. I see a lot of SCAD people at shows, but for every like 1 or 2 SCAD people I see, I know there's like 6, 8. I've had a couple of of my classmates come up to me and be like, how'd you break in, showing their portfolio? And I'm like, dude, you just got to keep showing up. You just got to keep grinding. Like comics is 100% perseverance. If you keep doing the work, and by doing the work, I mean like making books and having new portfolios show up to show off at shows, and you do it every year and you do not give up, eventually like cracks will form in the wall. Like you just got to browbeat your way in, basically.
Wow.
And I feel like a lot of people get discouraged because they try for a couple of years and then they run out of runway, basically. And it's tough, but like, you just got to keep making that sacrifice and hope that it pays out. This is how you end up with people in this business who do it because they love it. Because any normal, regular, rational person, be like, oh well, I like making comics, but I guess I'm going to be a plumber because I have a family. that kind of thing.
So when would you say was the big break for you? Like, do you recall the moment or
Oh,
assignment
yeah.
that made you feel like I made it?
So I was doing a handful of books. I think the first book I did for absolutely no money. I just needed to be like, I'm Nick Filardi. I'm capable of putting a book out on time, basically. And I worked some gigs for a little bit of money that like was kind of like, it was enough money that I was making hard choices between like, I don't know if I could pay my taxes. Sorry for my dog. So I was making a little bit of money, making hard choices with it, like not necessarily a livable wage, but surviving. And then I booked Powers. Powers was the first book that I was like, they told me the page rate, and I hung up the phone, and I literally like jumped in the air, pumped my fist, freeze frame at the end of the 80s like rom-com movie. Like I was so excited because I told myself when I started, I was like, all right, I'm going to give this thing, like, what was happening in the beginning of my career was so unsustainable. And I didn't want to be that guy that was like 10 years in and it was still unsustainable, So I was like, I'm going to give myself an appropriate runway, and I'm going to set clear goals for every year. And if things fall apart for whatever reason, then I need to step back and like readjust and maybe get a job, like a regular job in the meantime, as I kind of figure this thing out. And I booked Powers. I gave myself 5 years and I booked Powers on my 4th year. And I was like, oh, it clicked. Like, I don't need to get that desk job. I can just keep doing this.
Yeah. And I mean, talk about a team to be working with. I mean, Powers is, I think people now forget, Brian Michael Bendis is a name in comic books, right? You think Ultimate Spider-Man, you think about his, being an architect for Marvel, now working with DC, but like Powers was like, his thing when before all of that fame came. So I mean, talk about like landing in a really good project or for good team.
I was already a super fan too. Like I picked up Powers when it came out in '99, like from my shop at Sarge's, like before I went to college. Like I remember doing Powers fan art, like for some of my class projects in SCAD. Like, so I was on board, and I had met Mike. Previous to that, we did a book together. And Mike Oeming, if you ever get the chance to chat with him, he doesn't do a whole lot of shows or cons or anything anymore. But like at the time, he was like all over the place. Every East Coast show, he was like doing it. And he is like the warmest, like nicest, like most kind person I have ever met in comics. And he just was like he like held the door open for me in a big way. And I try to when I got out of college, I was like just very critical, and like art school kind of molds you into a person that is critical, because you have to be critical of your art. You have to like pick out what's not working and what's working in order to fix it. And so when I got out, I like was so turned around by that I was like, I don't know, like snobby. And then here comes Mike, and he's just like, he's hit this level of success already, and he's holding the door open for me, and he's making time for me. And like, he doesn't care like if you're a huge success or not. Like, he's still going to give you time of day. He's still going to be like a kind person. And like, I saw that, and it really helped shape like me on the right path for like not only comics, but being like a decent human being. Wow. So yeah. I can't say enough good things about Mike Oeming.
That is rad. And so who are you looking to, I guess in addition to Mike Oeming, I know you've also, you were under the tutelage of Lee Luridge, who, best known for his inking and color work on Batman Adventures, but who are some of your idols or mentors as far as like looking at their work and trying to imitate that or take something from that?
Yeah, I feel like Lee Luridge and Matt Hollingsworth were the two guys who were at the time that I was coming up in the early 2000s, like doing really great color work. Also Dave Stewart, but Dave Stewart felt, for some reason to me, like felt kind of inaccessible. He was using like these textured brushes. And at the time, the tech was like, it was hard for me to figure out how to even use a textured brush. Like, and I needed the basics. And Hollingsworth and Lee were both doing like basically like cell shaded single cut stuff. Like if you pick up those Batman Adventures books, like you were saying, it's basically, it echoes the show. It's like one shadow, that's it. And that's something that I could like wrap my mind around. And I knew that stuff was better than the stuff that I was making. So I was like, okay, how do we get my stuff to that level? And then once we get there, we can figure out textures and whatever, like figure all that stuff out. But I actually got my start when I was in Savannah. I was showing my terrible portfolio to other people at Comic Cons. And one of them was like, oh, you should send this terrible portfolio into Dark Horse. They didn't call it a terrible portfolio. They were being kind, but they were like, you should send this to Karen Neese over at Dark Horse. She does all the intake for color stuff. This was Dark Horse editor. And I was like, okay, well, before I send it in, I don't want to make any like, amateur mistakes. So I was like, before I send it in, I'll show it to Lee Lowridge, who had a studio in town in Savannah. And he had a handful of people flatting pages or doing work under the Xylenol name that he was like checking before it went to print, kind of thing.
Weren't they the Xylenol studio? Weren't they like a sub firm that like DC would kind of send like
color so there to? There was a couple of coloring studios like Hi-Fi. There was like
wow,
Gecko.
you might have just explained. For the longest time, I thought Hi-Fi was a dude or was someone. Like when I'd see the credit, I would be like, Hi-Fi.
He is a person now. I don't know if at the time he had a studio going.
Okay. So it was kind of like the same situation, right? Like one key guy, but he had a studio.
Like Lee is running it, and then he's got a stable of people basically prepping pages for him. And at the time too, in the studio, people were mailing in the boards, like the actual comic art. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In order to make sure I wasn't doing anything amateurish, I went in there and I was like, can you just take a look at this? And he was like, sure, come on in. Took a look at it. He was like, this looks great. He was like, if it helps, put my name on it. Hopefully you get a gig. And then like maybe a few months later, he had Nick Dragata was working in the studio. And Nick was leaving to pursue drawing comics.
To become the big name that he is now.
Yeah. He's a powerhouse. He was an amazing artist back then too. And I think that he was getting frustrated doing coloring. I don't know if he was frustrated or not. I'm putting words in his mouth, but I know that he decided he was going to try to do art full time. And so they were like, oh, well, we need somebody to replace him. And then Lee had just seen my portfolio. So he was like, come have lunch with us. And so I went and hung out with the studio, and they were like, you want to come in and flat pages? And I was like, sure. Because it was a nice check. It was part-time. I did it while I was in school. And I was like, why not? Like, no brainer. And I got to be around comics, which was like my end goal. And I remember they had, we were doing separations for 100 bullets at the time. And so these Rizzo pages would get mailed to the studio every month. We'd get like 22 original Rizzo pages that would need to be scanned in and like adjusted. And then we would pin up, Trisha Mulville was doing the art for that. And she would color it with markers, and we would pin it up next to the monitor and then try to translate her marker renderings to the page, to the original Rizzo pages. So I like, as a kid who is like, doesn't know anything about comics and is just enamored by the whole thing, to like get to hold on to these like Rizzo pages in the studio was like such an amazing thing, and it made comics feel like tangible and like achievable and within my grasp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it didn't seem like it was something that these people do in a far off ivory tower. It was like, oh, this is all accessible. These are real people. These are like, you know, I've held these pages. It's like a thing that I can do.
Yeah, you went
know?
from like outside looking into like being in the midst of the process. Like you had your hands on the process.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
And
especially for like being in college, like learning and at the same time applying. I guess
Yeah.
I'm assuming being able to apply like the things you were learning.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I was still not good. Like Lee tried me out on some he was doing stuff for Nickelodeon magazine as well. And it wasn't glamorous work, but it was work. So he would farm it out to some people who worked in the studio. And he was like, do you want to try these Jimmy Neutron pages? And I was like, sure, you know? And this is a chronic problem that I have, which is like, I'll be like, yes. And then I'll start working on it. And then I am just living in my own head. Like it's what am I doing wrong? How do I fix this? What's going on? Oh God, we need to go back to the other process. It's just like, it was a disaster. And this was like maybe my first work that I was really trying to do something professional. I turned in some pages and I went into the studio the next day, and he had redone all of them, and he had printed everything out that I did and everything out that he did. And he had laid them all out on the floor. And he was like, come in here and take a look at this.
Wow.
Like, yeah. He was like, you can't turn in this kind of work. Like, he was like, there's a glowing tube in the room. You got to roll with that. You have to roll with that when it comes to color.
I imagine it stung at first, but I mean, I guess looking back, that is a hell of a way to like get a lesson and improve.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It did sting at first, but it is like the best lessons that I've ever gotten within the industry have been
when you
hard lessons like that. Yeah. Like Bendis was very critical of my work on Powers when I first started, because Powers was an established template, you know? And then I came in and I had to kind of adhere to that template. And it was hard.
When you say template, like what was the template, or who set up the template?
So like Powers has a distinct look to it.
Agreed.
What I needed to do was I needed to go in and I had to create not only hard noir shadows, but almost black and white for basically anything that is not a superpowered individual. So like all these, especially if you're in the police station. If you're in the police station, it needs to read like a noir book, like hard and noir. And it was hard for me to up to that point when I was working. Like I would get pages and it would be a new project, and it would be, you know, do whatever you want. Like they'd be like, make it look good. And I would go in there and I was very colorful. I was leaning in that direction. And I started working on Powers, and he's like, this doesn't work for Powers. Like you need to desaturate this stuff. You need to draw it down. And then I needed to figure that out while I was also simultaneously trying to figure out how to incorporate the bright stuff and then make it all work together. You know, it like nowadays I've done so much Powers that me explaining it, I'm like, you just do it, you dingus. Like I've done so much Powers. Yeah. It's total second nature. But at the time when I was like just starting, these were things that I really had to clock hours into in order to figure out, because I just didn't have the experience. I just didn't know. And Brian, he like continued to be critical, and he's also at the time, like you were saying, he's a pretty big deal. He's got a lot going on. So his notes are like blunt, like to the point. And like I had to just like take the ego, just put it on the shelf, and then like get the book out. And like that process of month by month by month, like figuring it out was like huge growth from like my first Powers issue even just like 10 issues in, like never mind like the final Powers issues that I've been doing, but like, yeah, huge growth every time there's an opportunity. And I'm not saying that like listen to everyone who's mean to you, like don't do that. But like if somebody's coming from a place where they're like, I know about this, here's where you're wrong, give it a listen, because they're probably right.
Yeah, even if it's delivered in a maybe less than ideal or a positive manner. I mean, they say there's a kernel of truth in everything.
Yeah, for sure. The rule of thumb that we had at SCAD was when you're getting a portfolio review, if somebody tells you to fix something 3 times, like if you hear from 3 different people, like, hey, that arm's not working, like that arm isn't working, otherwise it's like quote unquote personal taste or whatever. But yeah, I learned a lot of hard lessons early on. And I think that's another thing that kind of makes people stumble as they're trying to get into the door, is they hit that first hard lesson and then they're like, oh man, I don't know if I can do it. Or they react with anger or whatever, and they do something else, or they don't necessarily grow,
I wanted to stay on the topic of learning and development. You've worked on a lot of titles in almost 20-year career, if my math is right. I mean, you've been involved with titles where you've colored artwork from John Rivera on, Cave Carson Has a Cybernetic Eye, Jeremy Juan on The Realm, Gabriel Ba, Umbrella Academy, and most recently, working with Ethan Beavers on Justice League Infinity. Which artist would you say has pushed or challenged you to improve your skills? And who have you learned from the most on the art side?
I think Cave Carson was a big jump. There's a lot of like, this is kind of a loaded question for a colorist, because you tend to work on like, at least, okay, I don't want to generalize for all colorists, but the way I work is I work on 4 to 6 books a month, and I work on like 1 book a week, roughly. So,
is that 1 book a week from all 22 pages?
Yeah. Okay. So like I try to, especially now I try to take weekends off, because taking time off is important. At the time when I was 20 whatever and an idiot, I was like, I don't need time off, I'll just work all the time. Don't do that. You get burnt out real quick. But I try to do Monday to Friday, start a book on Monday, finish on Friday. Next week, start a book on Monday, finish on Friday. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's what I try to do. And whatever lesson that I feel like I'm trying to wrap my brain around, like whatever I think the next level up is, I'm usually doing that, like figuring that out. I'm using every opportunity that I have to figure that out along the way with whatever book is coming in the door at the time. So like just recently, I did a bunch of Nightwing stuff with Travis Moore. Took me a second to pull Travis's name from my brain. And he handed in, I think we did the annual together. I think it was the annual. And he handed in some pages where he did some gray tones, where he like kind of painted in some shadows on some faces and stuff. And like, it like set my brain on fire. I was like, oh, I got to figure this out. Like so I did the gray tones. I did the book, and then I clipped a bunch of stuff that he had done in black and white. And I was like, I need to apply this to other places, and this kind of like rendering and thinking about cheekbones in this way, and like subtleties in the smiles and stuff like that. I was like, that's stuff that I was missing. So once I saw that, I was like, okay, we can apply that in other places. And you don't always get a chance to, like in particularly cartoony stuff. I was working on some stuff with Jimmy Ba for Truth and Justice, who did like a Robin story, and his stuff is very like leans into like kind of a cartoony Mike Mignola kind of thing. Super fun. Not a lot of rendering. You can't really start painting faces with that kind of stuff. But I'll take lessons and apply it everywhere I can apply it. The only places that I can think of where I was like really trying to level up and get a curve, where it was like, this book is presenting a particular set of challenges was Cave Carson. And we're continuing those particular set of challenges in World of Krypton that we're working on right now.
Oh, nice.
I just did the first issue with Oming on that. And because that book was like, with Cave Carson, it was, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. There were like thematic patterns through the book. There were zip tones that we were using in ways that was not traditional, like zip toning, like we were doing, I was trying to use the color registry to I was like messing with stuff. I made a magic eye thing in Cave Carson. Like there's this point where Cave, I forget what's happening in the story. Like Cave's eye is acting up or something, and he's like tripping out. And Mike put a couple of eyeballs across the page. And the book is very artistic. It's very wild. And Mike is amazing for setting up this kind of environment for it. And I took those eyeballs and I was like, wait, how do magic eyes work? And I was like, can I make a magic eye right now? And I was like, I spent like 2 hours trying to figure this out, like adjusting an eyeball here, adjusting an eyeball here. And I made a couple of rows. And if you relax your eyes while looking at that page, the eyeballs will pop up off the page.
Oh, I got to go back and look at this. So when it comes to like these themes and some of these challenges that you're talking about, like do you normally talk through it with the artist, or is it like just I got to pick it up as I get the artwork in? And I mean, how often are you actually like hopping on a phone call to, hey, I got this idea, or am I on the right track?
It really, really depends on deadline and on the company that we're working with and the artist that I'm working with. If like I already have a good relationship with an artist, like before I jump in on the issue, I'll just give them a call and be like, what are the themes? What are we thinking about? Like, what are you thinking about while you're making this? Like, how can I amp that up? And we'll just kind of shoot the shit on that, on just like storytelling and comics and what the point of the issue is, that kind of stuff. But a lot of times the way that comics are made, like you just don't have that time. Like often I will get pages and it's like, these pages need to get out. I need to start these pages because I don't have the whole book yet, but these need to get out Friday and I have some of it and I need to start now so I don't get behind. It's like when you're in that kind of environment, it's like part of the reason why I make the money that I do now and that I have the success that I have now is not because I'm like the quote unquote the best. Like this is something that I did a lot when I was first starting comics. I would pick up a DC book and I'd be like, I can color better than that. Like, why aren't I working at DC? And that's a common thing that a lot of aspiring artists do. Like they'll pick up a DC book and they'll be like, I can draw better than that. Like I've done it. Here's my portfolio. What they don't realize is that like when you're making your portfolio pages, you got all the time in the world. Yeah. And then like when I'm working on like, I don't know, whatever DC thing that I have that is maybe a little bit late, like maybe the artist took a little extra time, the writer took a little extra time, and suddenly we're up against the deadline and it's like, well, like this book has to come out like on time, and like DC has schedules to keep. Like I can't bump this book because this book ties into 2 other books. You know what I mean? So it's on me to not only do a good job, but to do a quick job and make it as painless as possible for editorial. And that's partly why I keep getting hired, is because like I'll do a really great job, but man, like I don't think that this is the other thing is like, you got to learn to let go of books. Cause like I feel like every book I turn in, I'm like, if I had one more day, if I had 2 more days, I'd fix this one thing. Like, and it's stuff that like nobody's going to notice. Nothing's going to matter. But like, I'll get it in the mail like a month later or whatever. And I'll look at it. And I'll be like, one face, like I should have fixed it.
There's a saying that comes to mind that I'm going to completely botch, but it's something like, it's better to get it out there than wait and be perfect, or I don't know.
Yeah. Like that. At SCAD, they told us, in order to get consistent work from editorial, you need to be 2 of 3 things: nice, quick, and good. And if you can make 2 of those things, like if you're good and quick, you don't have to be nice. But if you're nice and quick, you don't have to be that good. Like you'll still get consistent work.
I think you forget that, yes, you're working in an artistic field and everyone that you're working with are fellow artists, but, there is still schedules. There is still, things that are outside of your control that, you've got to go ahead and let go. You've got to adjust.
There's also practicality of like,
yes,
I'm getting paid X amount of dollars for one page. Like I could spend a week on that page and give you a beautifully painted page, but at that point I'm working for less than minimum wage. I'd be better off flipping burgers, So, and I don't want it like, to anyone listening to this, I don't want it to come off like, oh, DC's just cranking out books and they don't give a shit about quality. That's not what I'm saying. Cause like part of the reason why I'm hireable is because I can do it quick and I can make it good. Like quality is important, but deadline is also important.
Well said. You've almost been in the industry for 20 years. And I mean, let's be real. I mean, your bibliography and the projects that you've worked on, it's a long list. I mean, if you go on Comixology right now and just, type in your name, it's a 2-page list of multi titles.
Yeah, man. And 4 books a month, every month for the last like 19 years or so. It adds up.
That's not even a subtle flex, ladies and gentlemen. That is a flex. And you mentioned, always trying to go that next level. I was curious, like, what is that next level for you now? Like, is there artists that you still are looking to work with and color their work? I mean, what does that next level look like to you?
Oh, that next level right now, this is the thing. So when you start, it's like the next level is easy to figure out. And in the middle of my career, I actually got kind of, I don't want the show to go too dark, but I got a little depressed because I was like, in the middle of my career, I was like, I'd started working for Marvel and I was like doing that work and I didn't know what the next step was. Like, I was like, I got there and I was like, is this it? Like what do I do now? Do I just grind this out for the rest of my life? Because I was like, I don't know if I really feel engaged by that. And I was like kind of in like a weird place where I wasn't sure what the next level is. And to be honest, like the better you get, the more subtle these jumps in quality become. And one of the things that I'm trying to do now is do like a little more painting where I can in backgrounds, in faces and things like that. But it's also about learning where to put that time in and how to maximize the impact of that stuff. So it's not only just painting, but it's like knowing when to paint kind of thing. Because I've learned quickly when I was like starting to get into this is that if you like really render out every single panel, you're not going to hit deadlines. So it's picking and choosing battles right now for me of like, where do I spend my time? Where do I like, if it's a talking head scene for like 3 pages that is just setting up the issue, like the reader is going to have a greater impact on that last panel, on that last page. And that's where I want to put my time when it's like a big reveal or something like that. Rather than these talking heads pages, I was like, let's get through these pages so I can get to that stuff and like put time in, put heart into that. So this is a really rambly way to be like, I don't know, like there's so much to comics, and it's such a beast to make something from nothing that like I basically constantly wrestle. It feels like you're constantly wrestling with everything, and nothing is a distinct level up when you get later in your career until you hit that like eureka moment. And you might be like treading around that moment for a while before it's like, I figured it out. Like, this is the thing,
Who would you say in comics now, colorist wise, do you think is at that next level, or has hit, or is doing like interesting things that inspires you?
Oh man, did you read the Greg Smallwood, Tom King, Human Target book?
I have that on top of my stack, so not yet. But I've heard great things. It was Greg Smallwood. That dude.
You should stop talking to me and read that book.
We're just like, for the next 20 minutes, it's just an empty screen. You just hear me in the back. Oh my God. Yeah, oh
the
my
occasional
God.
Page flip on the mic. That book is really incredible. There's some stuff he's doing in there that I've toyed with before on some projects. And then some stuff that he's doing. It's like, I don't want to be like, well, I did it for no, because that's not what's happening. And even he talked about, he had like a thread on Twitter about how he was incorporating like background shots from 101 Dalmatians as inspiration for like some of the stuff that he's put together. And like, I've seen that stuff and like, I've had like similar impulses, but he's doing it in a way where he's adding another piece that I was not adding that is clicking together really well. So now I'm looking at that stuff and I'm like, okay, how can I make this work, but also make it my own thing? Like, I feel like that book blew my hair back like lately. But Blackwood is by Veronica Fish, and she's doing the art and she's doing the color. And I feel like Erica Henderson, Dracula Motherfucker, that book, also the same thing. She's doing the art and she's doing the color. And I feel like when you find artists who do the art, yeah, you should check it out. When you find artists who do art and color, what happens is they have a set amount of time to do the art, and then they go, oh God, I have a week to color this book. How are we gonna make this thing work? So they're working like, against the clock. And so because of that, the way that they color and the way that they kind of like, I don't want to say use shortcuts, because they're not using shortcuts. They're like, it's just like a different vibe. There's an energy to it that is just really unique. And a lot of times, I know you were just reading Eternals. I keep bringing that up, but like with old comics like that, they would do things like when they went into color, because they had a less sophisticated palette at the time, they would be like, okay, well, this is a crowd scene. Everybody behind the main characters is just going to be blue, like that kind of stuff. And I feel like with like Dracula Motherfucker and Blackwood, like Veronica and Erica are getting in there and they're like, I'm going to spend time here and I'm not going to spend time here. And it has this effect where it looks like it's modern with like these like throwbacks kind of thing to the way comics were made in like the 70s, which is like wild to me. And I feel like that stuff blows my mind. It's incredibly expressive. Like all this stuff, same with Human Target. Human Target is an incredibly expressive book. And that kind of stuff is like really blowing my hair back lately. It's tough to find a place to do that. Like I did an issue of the mainline Justice League book, and it's like, I cannot do this on that, like that mainline Justice League book. When you work on like a superhero with a capital S superhero,
big S superhero, little S superhero,
not little S superhero, capital S superhero book. It comes with an expectation from your audience. So you can't really, like, if I just turned in flat color Justice League book with like expressive swaths through it, they'd be like, we can't print this, like you gotta take this back and like make it look like a superhero. It has to look a certain way. There's
like,
the audience
this is Image?
it. Yeah, right. Exactly. So a colorist needs to understand when to do that and when to not do it. And so like I just did the Wonder Woman annual with Annie McDonald.
Oh, nice.
And like that book has to look a certain way. Like Wonder Woman has to look a certain way. And like it needs to communicate its ideas in a certain way. So I couldn't get crazy expressive on that. But if I worked with Andy, I've worked with Andy on a lot of different books. We did a, is it back here? It's not back here. We did a sci-fi murder book with Cullen Bunn. It's like a murder mystery in space.
Rogue Planet. Sorry, Rogue
Planet. There you go. I got to be a little more expressive in Rogue Planet and a little more artistic than I necessarily did with Justice League or the Wonder Woman annual that we did together. Like when you talk about comics that are capital S superhero, it's more about craft and less about expression. There's like, if you can imagine a sliding scale of like, you have on one end, you have like, postmodern art where it's just like a canvas of one color and that's it. That's the whole piece of art. And then you have on the other end of the scale, you have like Norman Rockwell, perfectly rendered human beings. It's like comics generally falls in the middle, but there's a big range in the middle where comics can live. And like some of it ebbs a little more to Norman Rockwell and some of it ebbs a little more to Mark Rothko, on the other side.
You're a very thoughtful guy when it comes to comic books. Like I like the way your brain works.
I've had 20 years to think about this stuff.
How long would you say? And I imagine the way you look at a comic book differs vastly from like the normal reader. How much time do you spend reading comic books and just enjoying comic books?
I've been lately in the past couple of years trying to figure out how many comic books I can actually read in a year so that I can make good choices as far as like where I'm spending my time. So the short answer is I'm reading more because of trying to keep that list. But it really depends on like my work level. If like, for example, I just did the Wonder Woman annual and that is 40 pages injected into my regular weekly schedule. So I haven't been reading a whole lot lately.
What was the what was the most that you were reading at? I guess at the highest point.
I was probably reading, like I get on kicks. Like a few months ago, I read all of the Parker series by Darwin Cook.
Good.
And then it got me being like, man, Darwin's still fucking excellent. And like I was like, I'm gonna get his old stuff. And then I bought his Catwoman stuff. And then I was like, Catwoman, that's a character. And then I was like, what's the must-read Catwoman stuff? So then I started reading Joel Jones's run on Catwoman. I read Catwoman when in Rome, which I had never read before.
Tim Sale.
Yeah. I read
Ed Brubaker's stuff.
Yeah, I read Brubaker's stuff, which was really, really fantastic. And then I found Javier Pilato. I'm not sure I'm getting his name right.
Talking about, though.
But he did a couple of Catwoman issues in there, and I was like, this shit is awesome. And I was like, it like really clicked with me. And I was like, I gotta look this dude up. And then I'm late to the game with that dude because like people love him. But
he's fantastic.
So I was like, I'm gonna read his Ninjak stuff, but I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah, that's right. He's doing a Ninjak series. He's also currently doing a I think Defenders series as well.
Yeah.
Put him in the same kind of camp as like Marcos Martin, Javier Pulido, and there's usually Paulo Rivera. Yeah, Paulo Rivera, Marcos Martin, and Javier Pulido are like
similar.
Yeah, they've got like some definitely similar tones, but I can look at each one and they've got certain nuances that make them stand out. But to me, they're like brothers from different mothers is what I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, so long story short, I usually end up reading maybe 10 trades a month, when I'm not overworked.
Got it.
If I'm overworked, because I do a lot of the reading, like I realized if you want to read a lot of comics or spend time consuming any kind of media, you got to find the time for it within your day. And it's like, well, I'm working all day, and then like I want to spend time with my partner Shannon, and we're watching X-Files right now, and I'm like, I want to spend time doing that. And then it's like, okay, I found out that like, okay, I have a solid hour before going to bed that I'm like, I could read something, but I don't want to disturb her. So I'll boot up Comixology and like, so I buy stuff on sale and I just consume on Comixology. Like I'll create a backlog and then burn through it, and I'll create a backlog and burn through it.
Same. I'm similar in that regard. I've only recently started getting. I started paying for a Comixology subscription, and my reading time is in bed. That's how usually I close out the night. I just pick something and I read it. Right now I'm going through Lone Wolf and Cub.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I realized I was buying paper books and not reading them. And I was like, what's the disconnect here? I was like, why? Because I'm excited about this stuff. I want to read it. And then I was like, oh, I don't have time to be like in a lit room by myself reading this. Like I just don't have that time during the day. And I'm trying to carve it out. And then so I've started to have this tactic. I know this isn't what you asked, but we're going to go here.
We're having fun, baby. We're just having fun.
I started to be like, okay, if I just want to read it, like if I just want to know what Batman's up to, like Comixology, done deal, whatever. But if I want to read it and I think maybe I'm going to want to save it, I'll pick it up in print.
Oh, same.
Or if I'm going to read it and I know somebody who's going to also love it, like in my life, that might give it a shot, like I'll pick it up in paper, read it in paper, and then gift it. So like that's kind of where my head is at, because I'm trying to declutter and like get rid of things that are piling up. So yeah,
Nick, I want to get us back to talking about Justice League Infinity, because I want people to know how awesome that series is. It's the official kind of, I mean, it's canon, I'm assuming, but it's the continuation of the incredible Justice League Infinity cartoon. For those of us who were watching that when it was coming out, that show ended on season 3, kind of on I wouldn't say a giant cliffhanger, but definitely left some things open to interpretation. Now we've got this year, Justice League Infinity launches. It's up to issue 5. It's written by J.M. DeMatteis as well as Justice League Unlimited producer James Tucker. And I was curious, how did you get the opportunity, as well as what's it like knowing that you're working on such a beloved franchise and series?
So I had gotten the opportunity because
I'm just fucking good like that.
No, I was like knocking down DC's door for basically any work at all. Like so as a colorist, we're like third in the chain of as far as making something.
Mm-hmm.
So when the pandemic hit, and then suddenly Diamond wasn't able to distribute to every state, and then Diamond shut down, and then it was like, well, comic books aren't really getting made, and then people were like, okay, projects are pencils down now. What happened was there was like a chain reaction of like, okay, writers stopped writing, but like I was still coloring, and then artists stopped drawing, but I was still coloring, and then finally I stopped coloring, and it was like maybe 8 months into the like regular pandemic where I started to see work just like slow down. And I think Nightwing was my last project that I was like consistently working on. And then when that stopped, I was like, oh God, it was like, I need work. And so I just started hitting up like every contact being like, I need anything you got. Like everything else was, and I was in a weird spot where it was like, things are on pause, but they could start at any moment. But I also needed work. So it was like, I don't want to overbook myself and overextend, but I also need like, to pay the rent.
Yeah, these bills are not going to be on pause.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So it was kind of a weird spot. And so I was like hitting up DC for basically anything they got. And they were like, we actually, they were like, we got this thing, it's like a continuation of the Justice League cartoon, and like, our Batman version of it like did pretty well, so we're gonna try it. I was like, they were like, are you interested in that? And I was like, yes, give that to me. I was like, I am hungry for that, because I knew
who's on it. Just give it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't need any details. Just put it in my inbox. Let's go right now. Go. And I like Batman the Animated Series and the Justice League. I cannot say like how many times I've watched them all the way through. It is an infinite amount. Like it's in my DNA as a creator, that stuff. So it was such a great honor to be able to do it, but it wasn't like I'm like seasoned enough in my career that it's like at one point, if I had gotten this earlier in my career, I'd be afraid to break it. You know what I mean? It'd be very delicate. I'd hold it very carefully, and I'd just be like, is this good enough? Does this match the show? Am I good now? Are we good? Like, I'd be scared of it because I'd hold it in such reverence. And I've hit a point in my career now where I'm like, not only do I know how to like hit the marks of like what they want as a comic, and like not only do I know like how to hit the mark because I'm familiar with the show, but I'm like, I know how to approach it as a comic book rather than a show. Because when you make a show, everything has to move, it all has to be animated, it has to look a certain way. So I'm like, okay. I was like, before we start, let's just envision in our mind's eye, what if Bruce Timm got to draw this and he got infinite time and he could marker render every single image? I'm like, what would it look like? So I kind of approached it from that angle of like, we're going to get some time to make this thing. It needs to look like Justice League, but it also gets this opportunity to look like a comic book, to look like polished, to really like play with light sources and special effects and particles and things like that. Like, what would Justice League look like if we got to do that? And so that's what this book is. That's kind of where I approached it from. And then it has an additional bonus of being like, I was not working on anything when I started this thing. So I was like, it had 24 hours a day, every day living in my headspace. Like, I was like, I need to Babe Ruth call this shot so that DC like keeps hiring me, like I need to like be like you guys aren't giving me work right now. And you know what, DC, I'm gonna say it. You fucked up. Like, you should be sliding some pages my way. So I had next to grind when I was like making this book. I was like, we're gonna make this book
never
killer.
Again. I will never have a DC drought again.
Yeah. I was like, we're gonna make this book killer. So
polished is a good word for this book. It looks sharp, man. And if I was just to compliment your contributions, I mean, your colors are eye catching. I love the wide variety of hues, and your colors look so natural to the characters at that. And I'm glad you brought up the like the energy particles. Like it feels like a Justice League event. Like there's a sense of grandiose scale to it. Like anytime, like when Darkseid and the Fury show up, or you're looking at, especially in like issue 1 where Mazo's floating out in space, like the way you've got like that landscape in space is like really enthralling. Like really solid work, man.
I really, like I said, I really wanted to knock it out of the park. Did you, out of curiosity, did you read the digital version or did you read the print version? Because I specifically made two versions.
I've got, I think, digital, because I mean I pre-ordered I basically pre-ordered the whole series after reading issue 1, and I believe I read issue 1 on pre-order.
So when we started, it was going to be a digital first, and then we're doing 10 pages at a time as a chapter, and then they would later be collected. And then we got, I think, to issue 4, and they were like,
we got something.
Oh, we're just going to put it out side by side.
Nice.
Like, it's just going to be a comic. And that had to do with like DC kind of restructuring and reworking what they were doing with their digital firsts and stuff like that. But at the time when I started, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a print version. And then real quick, we're going to get into some nuts and bolts of like coloring a little bit. CMYK, you can never get brighter than the page that it's printed on. It's an additive thing. So every time you add like a little bit of cyan, a little bit of magenta, a little bit of yellow, it's going to get darker than that one like page print. And your screen of your phone with all its brightness and like you're reading on your tablet, RGB occupies a greater visual range, especially in the top end, in like the brightness. So I was making a CMYK version, and then I would go in and make an RGB version for the web, because I was like, this is going to be a web first. I want to put our best foot forward. And I would take it and like tweak it. So like Green Lantern, the greens that you get in CMYK are actually a little duller. And the only way that colorists get them to look like really amazing in, because Green Lantern's been in print forever. And he's a great example too, because like if you start leaning green into yellow and you make it like this greenish, like lemon lime thing, you start to like infringe in Sinestro's area, So you can't really get into the yellow section. Everything's got to stay in its lane. So like the way that they make green pop in Green Lantern books is that the stuff around it anchors it and accentuates the green, like makes it really look good. You work on the other side of the color wheel. So I was trying to do that. However, in a team book with a lot of different costumes in like locations that I cannot necessarily control, there's going to be some trial and error. And then I was like, wait, when we put this out in the RGB space for web, like I can actually like crank this green. Like I can just like just hit that slider and just like kick it over. So the RGB version of the book, like the Green Lantern greens, like are like eye-searingly green in like this really beautiful way, because I got to play in both color spaces. I got access to like another set of colors that I don't normally get to play with.
What?
So it was really fun to get to be in that space, as well as get to play with the Justice League.
Well, I mean, shit. You might have convinced me to try to like double up on these. I'm curious to see like how the contrast in that. And thank you for the explanation. Like, that's a great breakdown.
Yeah, I'm a big nerd for all this kind of color stuff. I really wish that like the whole industry would just switch over to digital. I know that's sacrilege. But like every single colorist would get access to not only way more colors at the high end, but like even at the low end. Like when you put something in print, it's going to print like a little darker than it normally does. So a lot of dark colors will just turn to black if you're not careful. So like colorists really work from like maybe like a little lower than mid-range values up, and then they don't get a top end that normal people do when they look at something on a screen do. So they work in a very narrow space of like what is possible for like Photoshop to work. This is one of the things that like drives me crazy when like an artist will make something and it'll go viral on Twitter or Instagram, and people will be like, why can't the comics look like this? And I'm like, because they freaking can't. Like they cannot, like nuts and bolts, like the colors this artist is using will not show up in print.
That is
so yeah, I don't know.
What was it like working with Justice League producer, James Tucker and J.M. DeMonte? Like how involved were they in the process as far as like what you were doing? Because it sounds like not only were you excited, but it also sounds like you actively took the bull by the horns for this project. Like, did they see that? Did they appreciate it? Did they have any input?
Absolutely. This is one of those projects where like I was looped into everything. Like
that's cool.
We were doing, when Ethan was doing character designs for stuff, when we did ship designs and things like that, like Ethan would show all of us. And like a lot of stuff too is like, I might have opinions, but it's also like I want to give Ethan space to play in. Mm-hmm. And in the scope of the team, I would say maybe my voice is the smallest in all of it. But they were very hands-on with just about everything. Like they were not shy about giving me notes about feel and mood and stuff like that. And I welcome it. I prefer, like, it's tough to get notes sometimes, but I prefer an engaged creative team than like somebody, like a lot of times I turn a book in and they're like, looks good, and then that's it. And it's like, well,
Yeah,
like,
it's like I want a lesson learned. I want something to take.
right, yeah. I'm like, let's hash it out. Let's get in the weeds, you know. I'm that type of person. So
Yeah, I'm the same way.
and they were definitely that type of person, and they were participating in the entire process. Yeah, a lot of stuff with character design, ship design, and mood and feeling and things like that. Yeah, they had a lot of notes, and they wrote a lot of that stuff in the script, which is a blessing, an absolute blessing. So yeah.
Have you had a chance to meet or talk to Bruce Timm? Like, has he seen the comic?
I've worked on one single piece of Bruce Timm art in my career. Not on this.
That's it. That's all you need.
But it was a dream job. They gave me. I did a cover for. I think it was like a collection of Superman animated stuff, and Bruce did the cover, and they wanted it colored, and they gave me. It was funny. So they gave me the line art, and then they gave me Bruce's marker rendering of the line art, and the thing looked immaculate. Like, I was like, just print this. I don't know why you guys need me, but they were like, it needs to look polished and even and things like that. So I took Bruce's marker rendering and basically just translated it. It's not my most artistic quote unquote thing, but I was like, I worked with him. I did it. This is a highlight reel like thing. This is a bucket list project. I got to work with Kevin Eastman for a hot minute this past year as well. And it's like bucket list project. Yeah, absolutely.
You're like DC's lucky they got back. They got back.
But yeah, I actually have not gotten a chance to really work with Bruce, and on that project too, he was very insulated from me, probably for good reason. Probably.
He'd be like, that Nick guy is really creepy.
He's a little intense. Yeah. He's a little much.
All right. Well, look, on the topic of Justice League and the cartoon series, I will ask, what are some of your favorite episodes from the series? Because it sounds like, you do a regular rewatch.
The episodes where the Question and Huntress, I think it's called Double Date.
Yeah. Question, Huntress, and I believe it's
Green Arrow, Black Canary.
Yes.
Those episodes are so good. Anytime the Question is on screen and like chewing the fat, it's so good. There was a scene where I forget who's questioning. Somebody is questioning him. Like they've captured the Question. They have him locked in the chair, and they're like, "Tell us the truth." And he's like, I forgot what he says. Something like fluoride has a more sinister motive than the population knows about, and they like buzz him, like they're torturing him. But like, I just, that show, like, just made me love the Question. And if I ever got a chance, like, to write anything, like, I would bring the Question back for his own series. Like, he keeps getting his own series, and then Renee Montoya became the Question, which was awesome. But like, it never gets off the. It's all these weird superheroes that like creators love, that like the general public is like, I don't know.
My favorite titles are those like BC. I mean, like Tom King's like Adam Strange series. It just wrapped up, fantastic. So I'm always on the hunt for like those BC list characters that writers are like, I know I've only got one shot at this, so I'm gonna go all in.
The show made me also really love Dead Man. Did you ever read Kelly Jones's Dead Man stuff from back in the day?
No, I've not, but I know I've seen that like pictures from that.
There's not, in my opinion, there's not a lot of really great Dead Man stuff out there. A lot of people try, but I feel like that first Kelly Jones run, it's funny because like it's a collection of short stories of his, and the first issue, you can see them being like, we don't know what to do with this guy. And then, like, they're like, oh, we're making it this. And like the place it ends up being is just like a place I want to live in with Dead Man and Kelly Jones forever.
I'll have to put that on my list. I've started to, and I think that's the best part about having HBO Max is that, you've got access to the DC hub, which has got pretty much every DC. So I've been revisiting a lot of the Bruce Timm-verse because we did an episode on Justice League. We've did one just on Batman Beyond recently. But I started rewatching Superman, the animated series. And I got to say, I think that as a kid, I liked that one just a little more than Batman, the animated series, because there was...
Really?
Yeah, I think it's just because there was more direct action, bigger action in Superman. And I was really into like Dragon Ball Z fighting games and things like that. So I guess I lean more towards violence, like Batman. Batman
you wake up and choose violence.
Yeah, I mean, as an adult, Batman, the anime series all day, but rewatching some of these Superman episodes.
That's funny because I tilt the other direction. Like, I feel like that Superman stuff I like more as an adult than I did as a kid because, you were right. It is a little more actiony. It's a little more superhero-y, but I feel like the thing that I didn't respond to as like a teenager, I was like, Batman's dark and troubled and I get him, And then as an adult, I was like, the heart of that Superman show is like Superman is aspirational.
Yes.
Like he is the best of us. And like, I feel like, man, we just need more of that. Yes. And like, as an adult, I'm like, oh, I get it. I get why this is important. But as a kid, because, your life is very safe as a child, hopefully very safe. Like the Superman stuff just didn't resonate with me.
Dude, well said. That is a big reason why Superman is one of my favorite superheroes. I know it's like kind of a boring and vanilla response, but for that same reason, I think the more as I get older and realize like how shitty the world can be, like sometimes I want to feel inspired.
Yeah, you want to feel hopeful.
Yeah, well said. And the Superman animated series has, I don't know, for some reason those villains, his rogue galleries just really stick out to me. Like the Parasite episodes, like and Metallo was so even like I rewatched a few of his episodes.
One of my favorites is the one where Bruce Wayne goes missing because Brainiac took him over and to like build a rocket or something, and then Superman's like, I'm gonna pretend to be Batman. And then like Bane is like, oh, I'm gonna cut loose on Batman, and like throws a giant Easter Island head on him, crushing him to death. And he's like, oh, I thought this would be a little more climactic because like Superman just takes the hit, like he's like whatever, and then the Easter Island head cracks open and Batman gets out of it, and like Bane is like,
what the hell am I stepping
into?
No,
oh no.
And I'll say, I will never forget the episode. I think it was like the season 1 or 2 finale, where it was like the Dark Side episodes. Blew my mind as a kid to watch like Superman have to. And I mean, this was before I read like, Death of Superman or really any comic book. So to see like Superman struggle against Dark Side and still come out in the end was like mind blowing. When Dark Side grabs Superman, or was it vice versa? One of them ends up blasting each other in the eyes with lasers. I think it was Superman to Dark Side. What? Like, you could not tell me that was not the coolest shit. So
yeah, I also love that stuff because it's like my first introduction into like the Kirby Fourth World stuff. It's like,
that is a good point.
Like, that's
a very good
it's
point.
like, I don't, as a kid, those books would have been inaccessible to me because big time. It's older, it reads in a certain way.
Sure.
You don't necessarily appreciate it. And then now as an adult, I'm like, they should put Jack Kirby on money. Like we should get Andrew Jackson out of there and we should put Jack Kirby on money.
I can get behind that. I can get behind Congress. I need that to happen. That is funny. Nick, I want to go back to talking about your career because you brought up something that I think is very interesting. And I actually have that noted here, is that as I was going through your bibliography and research, it dawned on me how inconsistent crediting in comics can be. There are some covers and websites that I won't name today that don't necessarily credit the colorist as predominantly as the writer and artist, especially I think in older books that aren't from like the last 10 years or so. I think that's where it gets a little shaky, where they don't credit the colorist on the front page of the book like they would the artist and writer. Sometimes even the inker will get credited before the colorist. And I was curious, do you think that colorists are or have been represented and spotlighted in the comic book industry adequately?
I think that they're starting to. I think it's a change that's happening. And I would say the same can go for the letterer too. Like letterers make or break a book. And
That's a good point.
In my opinion, there's this constant battle between like, well, we should put and this is where I fall, is like anybody who works on the book should just be on the cover. Like that's the way it should work. Like all said and done. Easy to figure out. And plus you don't know who is going to be a draw on that book. You know, you don't know if like somebody is a fan of like a particular letterer. I was actually, when I was reading that Tom King Smallwood Human Target, when I was reading Human Target, I was like, man, some of the letters in this are so good. I'm like, I gotta remember who the letterer is. I feel like you should just credit everyone. And then there's the other side of the argument, which is, well, the artist and writer are normally the people who attract someone to a book. And if we put more names on the cover, it could potentially confuse people, or like we're creating too much white noise around the signal that we're trying to broadcast, kind of thing. And, you know, it's like as a colorist, I get the luxury of being able to kind of like sit back and let other people figure this stuff out. Cause like, I don't have the DC marketing team behind me, you know, like I don't know what the correct answer is. I don't know if they've done like collected data on this stuff. I just don't know. But like, I do feel like every single person should be credited. And then as soon as you open the thing, the editor should be there front and center as well. Like
that's a good point.
Yeah. I feel like everyone is bringing a piece to this game, and it deserves to be recognized. But I do also think that like, I think it's an accessibility thing too, that like maybe colorists don't get the level of respect, because I feel like most comic readers have at one point in their lives like picked up their pencil and tried to draw Batman or tried to draw Spider-Man. You know, at one point they have lived that struggle of like, how do I make this comic book? And they've also, everybody's like written something through their, you know, high school career, whatever, and they understand what writing is. But I don't think that a lot of people, the average comic reader, has tried to sit down and color a page. So I think there's a misconception of like, oh, well, you just colored Superman blue and you moved on. Like how hard is that? Anybody could do that. I think there's that misconception, and that the more people to even just get to like take a shot, like try a page out, not even trying to be like, I'm going to break into the industry, but just like sit down with a page in Photoshop and try it. It will give you a huge like look into like what is actually happening in the nuts and bolts of this page, and what the colorist is doing, and how difficult it actually is. And I think that if more comic artists or comic readers did that, there would be more fan appreciation for the colorist.
Well said, man. I can't applaud that enough. That is a very good point. I think I've always stopped short of actually trying to color. And, you know, Ashley, who's a co-host on the show, she has tried to share like, you know, like when she gets projects, like it is all hands on deck. That is what she's doing for, you know, a month. You know, she's working on this children's book. And, you know, you think children's book, and, you know, you kind of see like the colors that are usually involved in children's book, you know, kind of flatter or whatever it may be. But, you know, I'm lucky enough to have her perspective in that regard. And, you know, hearing you say that too, it's like, yeah.
Everything's choices and time, man. Everything. Even if you think you know what your choices are going to be going in, like you get in there and get in the weeds, and you're like, it could come out a different way, and you got to nudge it back or whatever. Like, yeah, anything can happen once you get into that space. The same is true for letterer. I've been writing. So when I had the COVID slowdown, I wrote a bunch of like little horror short stories, and then I started drawing them. And then I was like, I'm going to start lettering. And I was like, I'm just going to hand letter it. And I was like, oh my God, letterers are vastly underappreciated.
Adam Wallet, he was a co-host on the show a while when we first started, And he's moved on to much bigger and better projects, specifically like doing a lot of lettering work. It was thanks to him and my friendship with him and meeting him that the way I looked at lettering just changed. I remember being at the shop and, kind of asking him to explain, like, what is it that a letterer exactly does other than the very obvious? And, he explained, like, you don't notice bad lettering until you notice it, right? Like,
Exactly.
good lettering kind of goes, like you said, kind of unchampioned, unnoticed, but, a letter plays such a key role in, the flow and the pacing and where your eyes kind of go to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to your point that you said earlier that it is incredible to think about creating this art piece from nothing, and the different involvements and different teams that are involved, and not just from the creative side, but the editorial, the scheduling, and the printing. Like,
Right.
You're right. Comic books. I think that's what I love about it. Because I'm very kind of like in the weeds type of person. That it is the true definition of a project, but it meets like art. It's art that has to have like that business kind of side to it, that logistic side to it, and it's all kind of got to work out very well.
Yeah, it's honestly a miracle that any book ever hits the shelf. There's like so much manpower and so much creative thinking. And then like, I cannot say enough good things about every single editor that I've ever worked with, that like to get everything into a package that hits the shelf on time is like I said, it's a miracle.
Well said. Nick, you're also an avid gamer. I was scrolling through your Twitch this morning, and I see you're playing through Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Does gaming like influence your artwork or inspire you in any way, or is it strictly like a cathartic like hobby for you?
So like I was saying, I ripped the lasered assembly out of my GameCube and put a new piece in. I've started like not only doing gaming, but like taught myself some soldering stuff.
Oh, nice.
I've been repairing some Game Boys. That's kind of like the baby steps of like learning how to work on electronics. So I've been doing that as kind of like a catharsis, like
Nice.
Get away from the screens, get away from comics. Like this is an entirely separate thing. But I mean, as far as like inspiration, like everything inspires me. Like I'm up in North Carolina and it's like we hike the mountains and stuff, and like there's the other day that we were hiking this like huge waterfall, and we were there very early and the clouds were in a certain way and the light was peering in, and like it was that like God rays down onto the waterfall, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I was like, where can I put this? Like this needs to go somewhere. Yeah. So it's like, okay, file it away, and then maybe eventually I'll get some time to put that somewhere in a book.
That's cool. All right. Well, Nick, I got one more question for you, and we can get to wrapping this epic conversation up. Aside from keeping busy with a full-time coloring career and streaming on Twitch pretty regularly, I also noticed that you have a YouTube channel where you discuss all things comics, as well as, quote, giving you that motivation and arming you to take on the industry, end quote. So I'd like to know, what's a piece of advice that you'd give to aspiring or rising creators looking to break into comics? Specifically, maybe something that you wish someone would have told you as you were trying to get your foot in the door.
Something that I wish that I was told. There's a lot that I wish I was told in the beginning. I think that the big thing is like grind out the work, but don't chase the stardom, because like one of the things that I didn't realize was when I was breaking in was I was trying to go to shows, go to Comic-Cons, and I was like, did I get into the right party? Did I meet the right people? Like that kind of stuff. And it was like, oh, I gotta hang out for like a second with Kevin Smith or like whatever. And then things will click. People will see us together and it's like, no, what I didn't realize at the time was that the people who were breaking in with me, who were also putting that time and energy in, like, not only did they become good friends, but they are also like the peers that like I work with now. And it's like we're still working together. I was saying that Andy McDonald and I did the Wonder Woman annual that's going to come out, and he and I were, that was my first book. I feel like to give a piece of advice would be like, slow down and just like appreciate the people around you and appreciate the moment, because like even though it feels like you really got to like get to that next rung and get to that next rung, you don't realize you're already there if you're just like grinding and doing the work and participating with the people around you who are doing the same thing.
Wow. I don't think I've heard that one yet. Not chasing the stardom. I guess it's sometimes, and I talk about to this with my buddy Drew all the time, that when you're in comic books, you view like to me, there are like, big, like Brian Michael Bendis, Gerard Way, like those are in our scope, like superstars, like,
yeah, absolutely.
So I guess I've never thought, I guess in that same vein, it's not illogical to think that you could be trying to get into comic books chasing that stardom rather than like honing your craft, perfecting it, and having a pure love of the hobby and the medium.
Yeah. And when you find other people who are doing the same thing and at the same skill level and working on the same problems that you do, it's like you will find that those people are going to be your like lifelong creative friends. And then when it's a lifelong friend, they eventually rise pretty highly in comics and become stars themselves. Like the second book that I ever worked on was Paul Seda. It's like, and the dude's a powerhouse. He's great. And like, I love chatting with him at shows.
What is that saying? A rising tide lifts all boats?
Yeah, 100%. And, I've been slacking on it because I've been working so hard in the last year. It's easy for me to get on Twitch and stream games. It's hard for me to put a full day of work in and then get on Twitch and be like, now we're going to color more, But like my YouTube has like a back history of me coloring because I wanted to try to like make the wall that separates, the reader or the aspirational artist from like the person in the industry as like transparent or destroyed as possible. I want to be able to bring people in and like see it happen. And the reason that I was, I uploaded all of those, and I uploaded like, how to figure out your page rate, how to properly pay your colorist, like what is a good rate, like how to figure out all this stuff, is because like this is all stuff that I wish I had when I was coming up. And I also put together like a pre-prepped, like flatted portfolio of like handpicked pages by me of like, here's to get a well-rounded, like normal, sized portfolio. It's like, I think it's 12 pages total. And it's like a little bit of Jim Lee Batman. It's like a little bit of Stray Bullets. It's like, a lot of like some Bone pages are in there. So you get like a good gamut of projects. And then not only that, but like I tried to pick fan favorites so that if you showed them to somebody and they could be like, oh, I love I remember when this Jim Lee book came out, it blew my mind when he was on Batman. And then you get a conversation going and you make like a real human connection with another artist rather than just being like, here's my portfolio. It's 30 pages. I don't know. It's my buddy's work, you present yourself in a more professional way. And I wanted to also make that easy to do. So that portfolio is also up. I think I called it the Ultimate Portfolio. It's like pinned on my Twitter. So you can just pull it down there. And I even colored a couple of those Batman pages on stream. So you can see me doing the work if you want like a little cheat sheet to try your hand at it. Give you. I'm trying to give you as much of a leg up as possible.
Yeah, you're giving them the blueprint. You're giving them the blueprint, and that's awesome that you are talking about topics that I don't think like every professional is comfortable talking about. Like page rates and certain secrets to the industry and things like that. So that's fantastic, Nick. This has been a great interview. I know that I've got like a short interview from the first time I had met you. I think it was one of our first Patreon episodes. But I'm glad that I finally got you back on the show for a full conversation. It exceeded my expectations big time. And I want to thank you so much
for having me,
for joining us today. Do you want to go ahead and shout out where people can follow you, whether it be for new projects or whatnot? I mean, what are some of your shameless plugs you got?
Twitter, I'm at NickFil, NickFil. Like I said, the portfolio is pinned there. If anybody is interested, even as an amateur, like trying it out, by all means do it. It's public. It's ready for download. I'm also on Twitch, twitch.tv/NickPhil. I haven't been doing a lot of art, admittedly. I've been playing some Path of Radiance. I think I'm going to play some tonight. And then I'm also on Instagram. I'm at Nick Filardi. I think I'm Nick_Filardi. I can't remember.
Sharing some dope
this is the worst plug. This is the worst plug.
Look,
It's the only one I couldn't get Nick Phil for. So,
look,
it is what it is.
I'll have links to all of this in the episode show notes. And I highly encourage all of our aspiring comic creator listeners tuning in to take these words and these lessons and things that Nick has shared to heart.
Yeah. The other thing is, real quick, I also run a Discord, and the Discord is open on my computer. Basically, if I'm in the chair working, the Discord is running. And the reason that I did that is because when I was starting to do comics, I never had anyone who was like established that I could be like, hey, this thing happened to me. Is this normal? Like, is this what should happen in comics? So I try to make myself as accessible as possible. So, and I try to respond to everything. So if you're like an aspiring creator, you should hop in the Discord. It's public, but it's not public. And you can message me if you're like, hey, I don't know, this is sketchy. I don't want it to be like public, but like, is this legit? Is this kosher? Or even just like questions like, how do I prep files? Like, are the ink limits are okay on this TIFF? Like stuff like that. I'm around for stuff like that.
Throw a dart at basically any comic that's on the shelves, and Nick's probably had some sort of hand in it. But with that being said, Nick, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, Shortbox Nation. Let's give it up one more time for Nick Filardi, and do yourselves a favor and jump on Justice League Infinity, especially if you're a fan of the Justice League cartoons. It's on issue 5 at the time of this recording, with issue 6 due out early next month. You can grab all 5 issues at your local comic shop or on Comixology, and make sure you catch more of Nick on Twitch if you're a fellow gamer, or check out more of his art on his official website, nickfilardi.com. Like I said, I'll have links to all of that in the episode show notes. And of course, the conversation doesn't have to stop here. Tell us what you thought about this episode, or if you're already reading Justice League Infinity, let us know. Feel free to reach out to us on social media or email us. Send us a short email to read next episode by writing to our inbox at theshortboxjacks@gmail.com. And it's a dog-eat-dog world out here in these podcast streets, so toss us a bone and hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss the return of the rest of the Shortbox crew next week. We'll be covering and revisiting some of the latest comic news and headlines from the past month for another installment of our Shortbox Stories segment. Find out more when that episode drops next Wednesday, but if that's too long for you to wait, man, consider joining our Patreon community for access to our bonus content, like our spin-off podcast series, Pilot's License. It's a show dedicated to the best comic book cartoons and animated shows, like Justice League Unlimited, Superman animated series, Batman the animated series. We've done episodes on all those shows. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on that, and join the Shortbox Elite over on Patreon. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, have a great week, and please continue to make mine and yours Shortbox. We'll catch you again next week. Peace.